Hey, welcome to another episode of the Go-To Physio Podcast. We're on episode 64 or season 4, episode 14, and this week's episode is critical. It is how to create self-managing therapists in your private practice. And what are self-managing therapists? Therapists that basically get on with their jobs, okay? They're accountable for their actions. You don't need to be constantly worrying about them all the time. You don't need to be constantly worrying about them sitting in empty treatment rooms, and they actually just do their job. They're A players, they deliver results, you enjoy working with them, and most importantly of all, they deliver patient results. And in the process, they deliver profits for you. You can pay them a fair wage, but you can also get your reward for investing and taking the risk in the first place as a clinic owner. Now, before we get into how to do this, we need to appreciate a couple of things. So a key principle of a go-to clinic owner is that we can't manage people. So again, this concept of self-managing, the terminology came across it from Dan Sullivan, who's no relation to myself, a business coach, and I really like that term, self-managing, okay? Because ultimately you can't manage people. So you have to give them the tools and empower them to ultimately manage themselves. And this is where a lot of issues happen from my experience of working with clinic owners, but also mistakes that I've made where I've almost tried to overmanage my staff in the early days and not give them the tools. And our jobs as clinic owners is to ultimately build our team, but it's also to empower our team and give them everything they need to get the results. And I think that's a key bit that clinic owners miss, is sometimes we're expecting things from our staff, but we don't give them the right knowledge, resources, tools to actually do that, okay? So a key concept here is we can't manage people, so they have to have the right tools. And that's essentially where your job as the clinic owner is to make the decisions on what the plan is in order to achieve your vision, your money now number, your dream life number, and all of those things, to ultimately then what are the decisions that we're going to make, to what activities are we going to perform in the business that's ultimately going to drive those results. And then your therapist job is ultimately to have the knowledge and make the right decisions, to do the right activities to generate the right results, which is ultimately revenue generating activities in your clinic. So the knowledge for your therapist on a simple base is they need to have the knowledge in order to do the right decision at the right time in private practice. They need the right skills in order to do the right activity to generate the right results for your patient, to get reviews and referrals, keep those patients progressing ethically, and ultimately deliver a great service for your patient, okay? So how do we create self-managing clinicians? Well, we're really going to need to pull on what we've talked about in the past few episodes, which is we're going to need our Head Physio Dashboard. We're going to talk about our 6 stages of our go-to clinic patient journey, and then patient value outcomes. Now, in the past few episodes, we've talked about these from the lens of a clinic owner. What I'm going to do in today's episode is I'm going to show you how your clinician can learn how to leverage these also for themselves so that they can manage themselves and come to you with the plan. And that's the key thing here. Is when I first started out, a lot of this was us telling our therapists in our own clinic, here's what you need to do. And what I quickly realized is there's no learning effect here. It's passive. Okay, I'm telling my therapist something and there's no learning involved. They're making the same mistakes again and again. And that's when I realized that I had to create a system and a process that actually not only has the numbers tracking and holds them accountable, but there's actually a learning effect. Otherwise, I'm going to be constantly saying the same things over time and time again. So what do we need in order to create self-managing clinicians and have a self-managing clinic? Well, the first thing, and I've put these down as number 1 because ultimately, although I've broken this down into 5 steps, technically there's 6, but I would actually put the 2 of these as number 1 because these are your responsibilities as a clinic owner, okay? So you're number 1 and number 5 in all of this, okay? Number 1 is you have to have high-will therapists, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that now in a second, but that's your job as a clinic owner, is to have the right team. And if you've got low-will therapists in your team, it's your job as the clinic owner, whether you like this or not, to remove those people from the business because they're toxic to the culture, to the environment, and most importantly, they're probably not giving your patient a great experience. So your therapists need to have willingness to actually want to improve both themselves, their patient outcomes, and do the right thing for the clinic. And if there's not a willingness there, then it doesn't matter how good everything else is. The other thing as well is you as the clinic owner's job is to share the vision with your team. You have to set the standards, share the core values, live and breathe the core values, and actually communicate what the clinical standards are. So again, our clinical standards are our Go-To Clinic Head Physio Dashboard. Metrics, our clinical standards are a high A rebook 90%, package conversion 50%, patient visit average 6+, cancel did not rebooks less than 8%, and then we also have other metrics like our net promoter score, reviews and referrals and stuff like that, but they're the key metrics. But all my therapists understand what the definition of winning looks like in my business. They understand when we're winning, and most importantly, they understand when we're not winning so that we can correct our action and actually course correct. So number one is you. You need to make sure that you have the right people and the right team, and that you've explained clearly what winning looks like for your team in order to have self-managing clinicians. If you don't have that, it's going to be very hard, okay? So how do we install this into our business? Well, as I said, we need that high will and we need those values. So again, the traits, the core skills that your therapist have, they might look like, oh, here's a CV, and when I hired this therapist, their CV was amazing. That's the skills that what they could potentially do. And experiences tells us what they have done, even though some people lie on that. That's a story for another day. Values tells us what a person wants to do, but traits tell us what a person will do. So what are their traits? What are your traits, your therapist at the moment? So we've got a high will and a high skill matrix here. So again, on the top left, you've got a high skill, but they've got low will. On the top right, you've got a high will, high skill therapist. That's obviously the golden thing. So our thing here with our clinic owners, what we do in the mastermind is we need to understand where our therapists are, okay? A high skill, high will therapist is a therapist that's hitting the gold standards, okay? So a lot of clinicians say, I've got a high skill, high will therapist, but the skill that we can objectively define is a therapist that's consistently hitting the gold standards. So a lot of clinicians, what they'll actually have is they'll have a high will, low skill therapist where there's a gap. Now again, this bottom right, there's going to be a differentiation there. A new grad therapist, for example, might come in, they're really hungry, motivated. They're at the bottom of the low will, high will, low skill, whereas a lot of your therapists that are working in private practice, they're going to be close to getting into the high will, high skill bracket, okay? So ultimately, we need to make sure that we've got people on the right-hand side of the matrix. If you've got therapists that are high skill but low will, they're the hardest ones that to remove, because they're generating revenue for the business, but they're usually the clinicians that they do things that suit themselves. They're a really poor team player. There's a big ego involved, and they're always the hardest people to get rid of the business. But long term, it's not going to be sustainable with people like that in the business. And as I always say to the mastermind members, you just have to make a decision today on these people. You don't have to get rid of them today, but you just have to put the plans in place to know that they're going. And there's a rule in my own business that it should never be a surprise when someone is asked to leave the business or leaves the business. Okay, so again, there's plenty of ways we could do this analytically, okay? If they're low skill, low will, they just need to be gone. There's not even a question on that. I just don't even know why they're in your business and why you're tolerating that, okay? So the second thing we need is we need a patient value outcome culture. So again, patient value outcomes, it's about ultimately extracting how the patient defines value, okay, and then aligning our treatment plan with that, because ultimately how the patient perceives value is the only thing that matters in private practice, whether we like it or not, okay? So we need to make sure that the patient extracts the value, they create the treatment plan themselves, and then we actually deliver what they were looking for, okay? It could not be as any more complicated than that. In terms of business, it's simple, sounds simple. Obviously, it's not as easy as that implementing. So that's where the outcomes are all encompassing, and the power of the outcomes is it allows us to allows the therapist to hold on to that treatment autonomy. All it is, I don't care if you treat exactly like me, physio, chiropractor, osteo, there's plenty of ways we can get results with patients, but all that matters is we achieve the outcome, and the outcome is undeniable proof that we've achieved it. The patient gives us permission to tick that outcome off as achieved, then there's undeniable proof that we've achieved value. So again, the patient value outcomes holds the therapist accountable to the patient, to the clinic, and to themselves. And I can tell you from experience that if you've got a high skill, low will therapist, they will absolutely hate patient value outcomes because their ego is getting in the way. I don't need these head physio numbers. All my patients do really well. when you actually take the emotion out of the decision making, you look at their numbers, 9 times out of 10 it's going to tell a different story. And when you actually put accountability onto the therapist, a high skill, low will therapist, very often the patients aren't achieving the outcomes. When you actually look and you break this down and go, have I got your permission to mark this as done? So again, if you were to ring up these patients that they've discharged, you wanted help with this, this and this, and usually that therapist won't even have extracted those things. So their notes will be all about range of motion, pain, but there's no way of knowing if we've actually achieved what the patient wanted in the first place. Okay, so that's going to do a lot of heavy lifting. This is one of the clinical tools that we use, some of our intellectual property inside the Go-To Clinic Mastermind, where we have these tools to help therapists connect the dots, make sense of symptoms, extract the value from the patient, and then ultimately go on and offer undeniable proof that it's been achieved. So you can see in this example, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to it, essentially it's a patient value outcome that's defined, and it's got wall drills, it's got press-ups and exercises. And again, there's no patient wakes up in the morning saying, oh, I want to get really better at wall drills. That's my pain point. Okay, so again, a little bit of jest, but hopefully you get the picture. So outcomes, mapping out the outcomes on the patient's treatment plan, it's undeniable proof that they've received value. It also does a lot of heavy lifting and makes it clear there's even more work to be done. It holds us as therapists accountable, but most importantly, it allows our high-willing therapists to actually change strategy early if the patient isn't progressing. It allows them to ask for help, to use the Go-To Clinic Hub or use the difficult patients forum if they need help or come to you. But most importantly of all, from a self-managing therapist culture, it helps us as clinic owners manage therapists who are discharging patients too early. Because the beauty of having the patient value outcomes is that we need the patient to give us permission to say, okay, are you now pain-free walking down up and down the stairs? Have you achieved this outcome? Yes, tick. Okay, so if the patient still has patient value outcomes on that are not ticked, then why are they being discharged? So it takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of it for us as clinic owners. So patient value outcome culture and in embracing that, it's going to do so much of the heavy lifting for you. The third thing that we need to do, as I said earlier, is we need to give our clinicians the knowledge and the tools in order to self-manage. And that's where we've designed the Go-To Clinic Hub and the Go-To Therapist Mentorship System for all of the clinicians as part of our Clinic Owners Mastermind program. Your clinicians can have access to that. We'll do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Or if you don't want business coaching, you just want your clinicians trained or train my clinician pathway, we'll do that. Or if you're a therapist working for someone else in private practice, you want to pay yourself, then the therapist mentorship will give you access to those things also. So the therapist mentorship gives the therapist the knowledge and the skills to thrive in private practice. Okay, we'll help them make sense of their patient's symptoms, confidently explain the problem, solution and plan to the patient and how many sessions it's going to take to pass stage 1 buy-in into the treatment plan. We've broken down the hands-on techniques, the rehab techniques into the fast start section, both in the mentorship system and in the hub, which is going to allow therapists to pass stage 2, which is the patient can feel a difference in the first session and ultimately hit the milestones in the first 3 sessions. Then stage 5, bridging the gap from low to high level rehab so they keep progressing even when the pain's eased, and then ultimately achieve their definition of success using the outcome-based culture. And then we've got the clinical tool that your therapist would use on a daily basis, where again, the outcome protocol, all your therapists need to do as part of the mastermind or train a clinician is they need to extract outcomes. All they need to do in the subjective assessment is tell me what outcomes you want to achieve, and we'll do the heavy lifting for your clinicians. We will give them the knowledge, the clinical reasoning, the skills, the hands-on techniques, the assessment techniques, the rehab techniques. We give them everything to achieve the outcome. All your therapists need to do with the Go-To Clinic method now is extract the patient value outcomes. And that's very, very simple to do when they ask the right questions for the patient, because the hub is set up to ultimately any body part. Okay, what outcome does the patient want? It's a lumbar spine patient. I want to be able to sit pain-free throughout the day. It's got all the clinical reasoning, all the key skills the patient needs, all the anatomy that's involved in that, all of the assessments, all of the hands-on, all of the fast start rehab techniques, and then all of the techniques to give the patient the outcome they want. So there's no real excuse there for a therapist to be able to achieve the outcome. The beauty of this, again, remember, we're maintaining treatment autonomy for the therapist, so they don't have to actually use our stuff. They just need to get the patient the outcome, which is the most important thing. So we have that. Then we also need a Head Physio Dashboard. So again, look, I don't want this to turn into a big sales pitch for the Go-To Clinic Hub and all of that. But what I am saying here is if you want to self-manage in clinic and culture, you have to have a resource that gives your therapist no excuses, that you've got all the knowledge and skills and tools that they need to do the job. You have it all in one place, okay? You have accountability through patient value outcomes. So again, whether you use our stuff or not, that's up to you, but you need that there to eliminate the excuse for a clinician so that they can self-manage, so that they can use now the Head Physio Dashboard, which I'm going to talk about, and actually get the results. So the Head Physio Dashboard is obviously our key numbers. The beauty of that is that's going to align to the 6 stages of the patient journey, so we can see clearly based on the outcomes of the patient where they're dropping off, which stage of the patient journey it is, and then what are the key actions that need to happen to improve that stage. So with each stage of the patient journey, there's going to be key actions that are going to happen regardless of your therapist treatment approach. A lot of soft skill stuff, because remember as well with the patient value outcomes, we've got all the clinical reasoning, we've got all the anatomy that needs to be influenced, all of the top-down stuff that needs to be influenced. There's no excuse in terms of getting the outcomes from here on in. Okay, so they can see the stages and they can use the Head Physio Dashboard to understand their numbers. So the Head Physio Dashboard is the vehicle that keeps your therapist accountable, because those numbers are the outputs of what happened. They tell you the inputs that did happen, or better still, what inputs didn't happen in the patient journey. Your Head Physio Dashboard helps your clinician to direct them to which stage they need to improve on. So the 6 stages of the patient journey, your Head Physio Dashboard tells you the numbers, that directs them to which stage they need, and then all they need to do then is focus on the key actions for that stage to improve their numbers, and most importantly, improve their protocols, because the protocols are the thing that's going to help the clinician and ultimately have the skills and the knowledge to get these results to pass the patients through each stage and ultimately being discharged as raving fans that give reviews and referrals. So you can see the 3 of those: your Head Physio Dashboard, your Go-To Clinic software, which is an outcome-based protocols hub, and a high-willing therapist are very, very important in order to have self-managing clinicians. And then we get to the big one, we get to you, okay? Your clinic owner leadership skills, okay? And again, I'm laughing here because believe me, I've learned a lot there myself with this. It's a journey that I'm still on myself, okay? Because again, there's nothing that'll piss you off more than a patient being discharged too early and they haven't achieved their patient value outcomes, okay? So I can feel your pain with that, and sometimes it's hard to keep your cool with that, okay? But here's how we can do it, okay, and work smarter. So the patient outcome values, as I said already, they're going to do the heavy lifting for you, okay? So by adopting a patient value outcome culture, it holds the therapist accountable to the patient, to the clinic and themselves. So remember what I said, if the patient hasn't achieved the patient value outcome that they told us in the first session they want to achieve, then why in the name of God have they been discharged? And you ask your therapist that question, you probably ask it a little bit nicer than that. There's nowhere to hide, okay? This patient, where's the proof, the undeniable proof that they've achieved these outcomes? Okay? There's nowhere to hide. So this is going to do a bit of heavy lifting for you. Ideally, the clinician is going to bring their own head physio numbers with a plan, okay? So the therapist knows their own numbers and they come to you with a plan. Here's my head physio numbers. Here's the gaps that I've identified based on the 6 stages, and here's the key actions that I need to take now in order to improve these numbers. So then you as the head physio, you basically coach the therapist. You either accept their plan or you redirect them if you think that they're overlooking something. So you can see a self-managing clinician is going to use their patient value outcomes. They're going to use the Head Physio Dashboard to understand the numbers. They use the patient value outcomes to understand, God, I'm actually behind track here. I'm not on target to hit these outcomes with the patient. I need help. If you're in our mastermind, you can use the difficult patients forums. You can use the hub to self-correct. Okay, you can get more support from us, or you can use the hub to actually understand what you're missing. Okay, you use your head physio numbers to go, okay, there's some actions here that I need to improve on. Here's my plan. Okay, and then the beauty of this for you as the clinic owner is the numbers and the patient value outcomes do the heavy lifting in managing your difficult conversations. So they manage the difficult conversations for the head physio, because from working with a lot of clinic owners, this is real. Okay, again, everything that we teach, it's not what sounds good in theory. It's from working with clinicians, it's from mentoring thousands of therapists now, and from working with hundreds of clinic owners and looking at these numbers. Okay, clinic owners don't like the awkward conversations. A lot of clinic owners don't. This is the beauty of the system, is it does the heavy lifting because there's nowhere to hide. Okay, the numbers, we take the emotional decision making and we use the numbers. Okay, so the self-managing clinician, they're going to be held accountable to themselves in the clinic with the value outcomes. They're going to use the numbers, they'll bring them to you with the plan, and they'll do the heavy lifting. Okay, so again, this is the beauty of this system. Here's a tool that we have in the Go-To Clinic Hub, essentially. Here was my numbers last month, here's my numbers this month. Okay, again, nowhere to hide. This is based on facts. Here was the overview of the month. So here's what I think of my numbers. Here was my focus that I was focusing on last month to improve. And here's what actually happened. Then here's my focus based on the numbers for this month. Here's what I say I'm going to do this month. Here's the evidence of success. So this number is going to change. And then here's my actions. And these actions then are obviously linked to the 6 stages of the patient journey. Okay, so the therapist fills this in the Go-To Clinic Hub. They download it as a PDF and they bring it to the meeting with you. Okay, and then you either accept it or you redirect your clinician. Okay, so the Head Physio Dashboard is the vehicle that will keep your therapist accountable. That'll help them redirect them to the appropriate stages of the actions they need to take. And then ultimately they're bringing you the program and the jobs are good in. That does the heavy lifting for the awkward conversations. So they're the 5 stages. Okay, again, you could say there's 6. But as I said, I actually like to group number 1 in as the clinic owner's responsibilities, and then number 5 is the clinic owner's leadership skills. Okay, but you can see steps 2, 3, and 4. So step 1, you need a high-will therapist. You need to have communicated your vision for the business, your core values of the business, and the clinical standards. They need to understand what winning looks like and what the behaviours are that will be tolerated in the business and that the behaviours that are needed to achieve the vision. Number 2, you need a patient value outcome culture. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to hold your therapist accountable to themselves, to the patient, and to the actual clinic. You need a resource that gives your therapist the knowledge and the skills, because again, if you don't have that, but you're telling them that they need to hit these standards, but you're not giving them everything they need, then it's going to be very hard for them to be self-managing. You need a Head Physio Dashboard with the appropriate numbers that guide your clinicians, that allows them to understand the numbers. And again, if you're part of our Train My Clinician or you're part of our mastermind program, we've got all of the cheat sheets and the trainings specific for this. So we train your therapist up on how to understand the numbers and the key actions they need to take. And then obviously then your leadership skills. And the beauty of this system and why I've had to create this system is for clinic owners that don't like awkward conversations. So this does all of the heavy lifting for you essentially, okay? And then ultimately, you've got the clinical systems in place, you've got the business systems in place. They are the foundations for your growth systems then. And the beauty of this is by improving your head physio numbers, your growth improves anyways. We don't even need to worry about new patients because you're maximizing everybody that you have. So then when we go to get more new patients and we increase our ad spend, we can outspend the competition and you can essentially dominate your area because you can afford to spend more because your lifetime value is more and you're improving your head physio numbers more also. So that is it for this episode. They're the 5 key steps to create a self-managing therapist in your private practice. A self-managing therapist is a therapist that has the tools to manage themselves essentially. Because you can't manage people, so you have to give them the tools to manage themselves. That therapist needs to be high will. They need to understand what winning looks like. They need to have accountability, which is achieved through the patient value outcomes. They need to have, as I said, the knowledge and the skills and the tools. They need to have the Head Physio Dashboard to understand if they're winning or losing. And then ultimately we need a good clinical leader that holds them accountable essentially. And the beauty of this is that all does the heavy lifting for the awkward conversations. So the process for this, again, as the clinic owner, you have to give them everything they need. Patient value outcome culture, Head Physio Dashboard, all of the resources they need. Again, we do all the heavy lifting for you if you want to get involved with us. The therapist needs to be able to understand the numbers. Again, I've got specific trainings to help you with that and cheat sheets and brochures and all of that we send to your clinic so that you can understand these numbers when you join our programs. So again, all of that heavy lifting is done for you. Installing all of this stuff is very, very simple. Okay, we've got all of the cheat sheets and all of that. And the beauty of this then is if you have all of this in place, you've got clinicians that are self-managing. We do that as well with your admin. You've got a self-managing clinic, and then ultimately you're going to have freedom where you're not constantly worrying about people because they have the tools, the skills, the knowledge to manage themselves. So if you'd like some help with this, there's a few ways we can help you. If you're a clinic owner with multi-therapists, then our Go-To Clinic Mastermind program is our business program for you. That'll give your team all of the knowledge, the skills and the tools. The patient value outcomes, they'll have access to our therapist mentorship system. They'll have access to our Go-To Clinic Hub, which is our patient value outcome protocol tool that they can use on a daily basis to essentially deliver outcomes for patients. You will have access then to some of our business coaching resources, everything you need essentially to achieve freedom. If you're a solo clinic owner, the Go-To Clinic mentorship is for you. That will give you everything that you need where you are on your journey. If you're not interested in business coaching and you just want your clinicians trained, that's where our Train My Clinician pathway is there for you. We'll still use your head physio numbers. If you don't have head physio numbers, you don't know how to get them, we'll help you get those very quickly, easily. I've got all the cheat sheets for you to extract those, and we'll work with your therapist and do all the heavy lifting. If you're a clinician working for someone else, you just want clinical excellence and you want to be the best you can be and you want to use numbers because you understand that the language of high performance is numbers, then the Go-To Therapist Mentorship is the appropriate option for you. Okay, so that's it for this week. I hope you can see the possibilities of creating a self-managing culture, a self-managing therapist. Again, that self-managing, I love that term from Dan Sullivan. I think it's a great term, and ultimately it's the holy grail, because if we have that, then that's the key thing that you need ultimately to have freedom as the clinic owner, while also ensuring that your actual therapists are delivering great value outcomes for your patients. So that's it for this week. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like a free copy of my Head Physio Systems 6-step checklist that I use to personally audit my own therapists to make sure that they can keep patients progressing even when the pain is eased, so that we can ethically increase our patient numbers, our revenues and referrals, head over to www.thegotophysio.com/checklist and I'll get that sent straight over to you. That's it for this week. I'll see you in next week's show.